Hello guys, and welcome to another monthly reading wrap up. And also I will be including a October TBR in this video because I didn't get to read that many books in September, so I wanted to include some more books in this video. So we will be going over the books that I read in September, what I rate them, what I think of them. This is spoiler free. All of my monthly wrap-ups are spoiler free. Of course, I don't want to give too much away of the books, but kind of just what they're about, what I rate them, if I like them, and then I will go over some books that I am looking forward to reading for the month of October. And yeah, let's just get into it because I'm ready to talk about some of these books. So the first book that I read in the month of September was Lisa Jewell's None of This Is True, and I feel like I saw this going around like a month or two ago a lot. And I have read one other book by her, and it was Then She Was Gone, which I feel like that one was going around a year or two ago, and I definitely preferred this one over the other one. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I also am going to give spice ratings for each book because I just feel like that is important. And this one I think I only gave like 1 out of 5 little pepper, little spice. A lot of times in thriller books there is not too much spice, so there's not too much in this book, but I think it does suggest some level of spice. I can't even remember, but I just know it's not too deep. This one was very good. This one is about this girl named Alex, and she has a podcast coming out, and then all of a sudden she meets this woman named Josie who has the exact same birthday as her. They were born on the same day, and they kind of spark a kind of friendship relationship, but not really. Josie is a little bit odd, which this book is very similar to another book I read later on this month, you'll see. But so she has a podcast, they spark up a relationship, and Alex decides to bring Josie onto the podcast and kind of get her life story, her backstory, and it just becomes more and more insane and intense as that time goes. I do like how they jump between timelines in this book. It's not anything too crazy, like too far before or after, but they do a good job of that, and I always find that that's a really interesting element when reading a book because that kind of adds that mystery aspect to it. There is some mixed media within this, meaning you kind of get to see the podcast. It's more of like a documentary podcast, so you get to kind of see how people are watching a documentary of this podcast that was going on with this crime that goes on. This was a really interesting read. I haven't really read anything. Like I said, there's a book that I read that is kind of similar to this, but it didn't have the podcast documentary aspect, so that was really fun. I do suggest this book if you want a good thriller. It wasn't too crazy, too dark, so I think anyone could really read that book, but it also didn't wow me. Like, I don't really remember everything. I gave it 4 stars, and I think that's a fair rating, but I would maybe, like, thinking back now, I would give it like 3.5 or 3.75 stars. So that's kind of my rating now. I feel like when I rate books right after I read them, it's not always the truest rating. I kind of have to wait a little bit, and then I kind of have a more accurate rating based on if I remember them, if I think about them, things like that. The next book that I read for the month of September was The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I don't know if that's how you say her name, but that's how I'm gonna say it, and I absolutely loved this book. I gave this one a 4 stars, and I feel like that is a very true rating, maybe even a 4.25 stars, maybe a 4.5 stars. I don't know. I feel like closer to the 4. But this was so cute and so good, and if you are thinking about picking up this book, pick it up because this time of year, this autumn season, is the perfect time to read this book. Ashley Poston also wrote The Dead Romantics, which I read last year around October time frame, and that is the perfect time to read that book as well, and I loved that book. Her books are very quirky. This one is about this man and woman. Well, the main character, Clementine, she is like really close to her aunt who lives in New York, and her aunt passes away, but she leaves Clementine her apartment in New York, and so Clementine lives in this apartment, but she one day shows up into the apartment, opens the door, and there's a man standing in there, and he is from 7 years in the past. And so yes, it is kind of a quirky storyline, but I think that's what makes this book so fun, and I have heard nothing but good things about people who read this book. I haven't heard one person say, oh, I didn't really care for that book. It was very, very good, very just a warm hug in a book. Very good read, a little romance book, and it kind of reminds me of The Lake House, which is a really, I don't know, again, kind of cozy, soft movie. If you haven't watched that, that was really fun to watch soon after I read this, which me and Michael did. I had heard of The Lake House, which has, again, a similar storyline of one of them lives in the past, but they're like falling for each other. and it was just a little bit of mind-boggler because you're trying to figure out how does the time come together. But it was a very good book, very cozy, and the cover is just so cute. And her other book, The Dead Romantics, the cover is really cute too. They're like bright colors. I love that book. I don't know which one I like better. I would say maybe I like them the same because I love The Dead Romantics as well. Perfect book for the fall. That's probably one of my #1 suggestions for like a romance book. The next book I read is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I have this really beautiful set of The Lord of the Rings. I have never watched the movies, never read the books before, so this is my first time dabbling into that, and I'm very excited because I do feel like this time of year, the autumn season, is the perfect time to read cozy fantasies like this. I also recently got gifted the whole Harry Potter series in a really cool set, which I've read some of those books, but it was, you know, when I was so young, like middle school or elementary school. So I'm excited to get into those again soon too. I just feel like it's a perfect time to do that. And yes, I read The Hobbit. I loved it. It is a very, very cozy fairy tale read. It is a slow read. It is not something that, you know, is super fast paced, wants you to get to turn the page. Although there was a little bit of parts of this book where I was like wanting to read a little bit quicker than other parts. But this is a slow read, but a cozy read, a perfect read for like a cup of tea when you're just snuggling up. I do feel like, I keep saying this, but this is the time of year to read something like this because I feel like that just encourages you to read something like this because you're already in a cozy mood. I'm obviously not going to really talk about what this is about because it is part of a series and most people already know what this is about or they've seen the movies, but I was surprised how much I did enjoy it because I kind of thought that I wouldn't. But by the way, look how pretty this, like, they have pictures throughout the book of the scenery and what they're describing, and I just feel like it's exactly what my mind was describing, so you can really tell how, you know, amazing the author is. And this book was written in like the 1930s, which is just so crazy. It was written so long ago, but you can definitely tell because the writing is different. It does read kind of like a classic fairy tale book novel, you know, so just go into it with that. But I think if you go into it expecting that, you will really enjoy this book. It is a great adventure story. I didn't know this, but like the whole time they're on a little adventure, which was just so fun, and I can't wait to watch the movies kind of bring the book to life. I'm gonna wait to watch it a little bit, but I'm excited to watch the movies as I read the series. But I gave that book 4 stars. I feel like it was hard for me to rate that book because it is such a classic. I almost didn't want to rate it, but if I had to, I think I would give it 4 stars because I really enjoyed it, but obviously it wasn't like a 5-star book. But I almost feel like I have to give it 5 stars because it's like a classic novel. But I wouldn't say that like that's one of my 5-star amazing books, but it's definitely a good classic that I was impressed by. So the last book that I read in the month of September was The Coworker by Frida McFadden, and this is a very new release for her, at least I believe so. It's one of her very recent releases. I know she's come out with a few and she's coming out with a few lately, but I have only read The Housemaid by her and The Housemaid's Secret, and I love that book. I gave The Housemaid 5 stars. I think I gave The Housemaid's Secret like 4 stars. I loved The Housemaid so much. I read it about a year ago, so it'd be interesting for me to see what I would have rated it now that I've read a lot more. But this was another good, very fast-paced thriller by her. I gave this one 4 stars. I think I gave every book I read this month 4 stars now that I'm thinking about it. So I had a very good, decent, very strong reading month. This one is about 2 women that work together. They are co-workers, obviously, and one of them is kind of the star saleswoman. She's very beautiful. She's very successful at her job. And then the other woman who's right next to her in a cubicle, she's kind of very odd, very quiet, very OCD-like. She goes to the bathroom at the same time. She eats lunch at the same time every day. She shows up at the same time every day. She only eats like the same color food, so she'll have like only orange food that day. You know, just very OCD, odd behavior, but she's a kind woman. But one day, Dawn, who's kind of the odder woman, she doesn't show up to work on time. And Natalie, who is kind of the star saleswoman, she is concerned because her neighbor next to her in the cubicle doesn't show up for work, and that is very unlike Dawn. So Natalie immediately thinks that something is wrong, and it just goes on from there. But it ends up where Natalie kind of looks as if she is involved in something that has happened to Dawn, and so it starts getting pinned on her, and that's basically the journey of the book. I really liked this book. It definitely reminded me kind of this book. None of this is true because it had to do with 2 women, and one of them was kind of odd, and one of them was kind of the star of the show, and you're not really sure who to trust. And I think McFadden does a really good job of doing that, because in The Housemaid, if you've read that, you know you don't know who to trust. There's a big twist in this. I felt like this one didn't have, The Housemaid had a big twist. This one, I kind of saw the twist coming, but there was like other smaller twists that I didn't see coming, so that was kind of fun. But yeah, I love morally gray characters. I feel like she does a really good job of that. I can't wait to read more books by her. I know she has a lot, and yeah, I definitely suggest this one. Very fast read. I really like her books. I definitely suggest her books if you want to get into some thrillers. You know, I didn't say spice level. There's literally 0 spice in this book, obviously in The Hobbit. But in this one, I think I gave, I'm so bad at saying spice levels. I forget that I need to say that for every book, but I write them down after I read it because I know I'm gonna forget. So the first book, none of this is true, I gave 1 little pepper out of 5. The 7-Year Slip, I gave 2 peppers. There was a little more spice involved in this one because it was a romance. The Hobbit has 0. And The Coworker, I just gave 1 as well. Like I said, thrillers tend to not have much spice in them, which is good because I feel like it doesn't take away from the mystery aspect. So those are all the books that I read in September. Like I said, it wasn't too many, it was just 4 books. So that's why I wanted to talk about some of the books that I'm excited to read in October, so that I could just talk about books longer with you guys. So I have 3 books here that I really want to get to this month, because now we're in October, and then I have 1 book that I don't have that I will talk about that I want to read. But this first book, I really want to get to it this month, but I'm nervous about it. But it is Misery by Stephen King, and the reason I'm nervous about this is because I read Billy Summers by Stephen King, and I did not like that book. And I feel like it was honestly it wasn't his skill with writing that I didn't like, but it was just some of the content that he was writing I did not agree with, did not like, thought it was weird. And I know he's kind of an odd guy, you know, he literally wrote a clown coming out of the gutter, you know, and taking kids down there. So I know that he's a little bit odd, you know, I can respect that. Okay, he writes scary books, but I also don't read horror. But Billy Summers, I feel like, wasn't horror, it was just thriller. This one I think is a little bit further, but I've seen parts of this like 80s movie and it was interesting. So I really do want to read this, and I feel like this would be the perfect time. I feel like October, November would be a good time to read this, but I'm gonna try to get to it in October. If you don't know what this is about, I'm not even gonna read the back, just from what I know. I think it's like about this author, and he has like a really big fan, and he gets broken down or something, and she like takes him in her care and like tortures him. That's I think what this is about. But I love this cover, by the way. I love this, like I know they have a bunch of different editions of this, but I really like this cover. Hopefully I get to this month. If you guys have read this and you like it, encourage me to read it. If you don't like it, let me know, because I don't know, I'm nervous about that one. That's the one I'm like nervous about, but I really want to get to it because I feel like this is the perfect time to read it. The next book is The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer, and I have heard nothing about this. I think I found it on Goodreads, and I thought the cover was really cool, and it sounded, again, perfect time for fall. But this one, let's see, I don't even really remember too much what this one was about, but I know it was about books and magic, so sounded interesting. So it's about this author, and he wrote a very famous, is it a children's book? Yes, a childhood favorite. And he wrote this book, but then he went on a spree of not writing for a really long time, and then he decides to, I think, have like a contest and bring people to this island or to this house, and this woman like loves this author, and then he says like you get to make a wish if you win or something like that. But sounds magical, sounds like the perfect time of year to read this. Haven't heard much about it, which I really like to read books that I haven't heard much about, because I don't know, then I feel like sometimes you can find little gems. Which brings me to my next book. I don't have it with me, it's on my shelf, but the first book in this series, which is the Galatian trilogy series, is The Ledge, and I loved that book so much. I think I give it 4 stars. It reminds me of ACOTAR, A Court, Thorns and Roses, the first book, kind of the first half of that book, where it is Feyre in her human village, which a lot of people don't care for that part of the book. They think it was slow, but I really liked that part of the book with her hunting in the snow and things like that. And the Ledge reminded me a lot of that. It was a good fantasy romance book. Wasn't perfect. ACOTAR is definitely better, but I really suggest that book if you are wanting to kind of get that ACOTAR feeling, You won't get it exactly because Avatar is better, like I said, but it was a really good fantasy read, and I just thought the aspect of it was so interesting, which there is humans and then there is these Galatian creatures, and there is something called the ledge, and the humans live on one side and the Galatians live on the other, and every year, every season, there has to be kind of like a sacrifice from the humans, so the Galatians will fly over and take one of them and throw them over the ledge, or they think that that's what happens. The humans don't really know because then they don't talk to the people who get taken. And obviously one day the main female character gets taken by a Galatian. So it is a very interesting book and I loved it so much. And this one just came out. This is the second book. This is called Chasm. And these covers are just so gorgeous. I think this one is prettier than The Ledge, but they're just so gorgeous. And I think the author, Stacey McEwen, I'm not sure how to say it, but she is like a book TikToker or something. That's what I read on the back of this. And yeah, The Ledge was her first book, and so I'm really excited to continue on in the series. And I haven't heard anyone talk about this series, so if everyone starts loving this series, I probably won't get credit for it because I'm not like on Book Talk or anything. But if you're interested in the series, definitely check it out because I think it is very interesting. I really like it and I'm excited to continue on in it and see what's up. But the whole first book is like based in the snow, so I feel like the latter half of the year is a good time to read that. And then obviously we're continuing in the same world, so I think it'll be a good time to read and continue on. And I don't know when the third one's coming out, but there's only 3 books, which is nice in a fantasy series when they're not too long. That being said, the last book that I want to read in the month of October, and there is other books I want to get to in October, but these are just ones that I'm going to share that hopefully I really get to, and so that when I do my October reading wrap up, you'll get to be excited to see these books within that, hopefully. But the last book that I'm going to share with you guys that I want to read for the month of October is A Curse for True Love, which is the last book in Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, and it comes out at the very end of this month, I think October 24th, and I am super excited, even though this series wasn't my favorite. Now, some people think that this series is a 5-star series. I did not feel that way. I really wanted to, but for some reason I just didn't. I think maybe if I reread the books, which I don't really reread books very often, but I think if I reread the books I would appreciate them more. It was fast-paced. It took me a minute to get into the world because I did not read the Caraval trilogy before this, which they suggest that, but I've also heard that the Caraval trilogy wasn't very interesting, so I didn't want to read it. I just wanted to read Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I gave, I think, both the first and second book like a 3 or 3.5 stars, and so I do want to continue on in the series because I did enjoy it. It just wasn't some of my favorite like die-hard books like some people, so I definitely suggest this series. It is a fantasy fairy tale series and there is romance involved in it. It's a very fun series. I think it's a pretty young series. I don't think there's much spice that I remember, so I really think a lot of different people could read this and enjoy it. It is fun, and I am excited to see where this goes, especially with him, because each book ends on a cliffhanger and the second book ended on a cliffhanger, and I need to know what happens. So I'm really excited to get that book hopefully right on October 24th and finish off the month reading that book, and that will be very exciting. So those are all the books that I'm going to share with you guys in today's video. I hope you enjoyed the wrap up and some books that I'm looking forward to reading in the month of October. Comment down below if you've read any of these books or if you're wanting to, what you thought of them. I love to chat with you guys, and I hope to see you guys in my next video and in my next reading wrap up.